question back and get back to you, sir.
Great. Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, thanks.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, thank you very much for your service. We appreciate it very much. We want to have a strong strategic relationship with both Azerbaijan and Armenia. And I think we have an opportunity now with the relationship declining between Armenia and Russia to be able to achieve that. But it depends upon us standing by our values as we resolve the issues in the contested area. I agree with Senator Menendez. The humanity crisis is horrible. And every day we wait, more people are dying. And the United States needs to take decisive action. And in doing that, in bringing the parties together and enforcing the corridor, safe corridor for the humanitarian assistance and having a ceasefire and setting up the climate to resolve on a more permanent basis the governance of the region. But to do that, we have to be able to show that we're serious about this. And I just really want to underscore the point that Senator Menendez said. When you routinely give the waiver under Section 907, you're saying that Azerbaijan has demonstrated steps to cease all blockades and other offensive uses of force against Armenia. And that's just not the case. So we lose credibility when that happens, when we aren't prepared to take decisive steps based upon our values. Yes, we want to have a strong relationship with Azerbaijan. They're an important country for us. But as President Biden has said frequently, our foreign policy will be wrapped within our values. And it's difficult for some of us to understand that based upon the actions in that region. I'm going to mention one specific case that was brought to my attention in Azerbaijan, and that is the activist who was imprisoned, Gubad Ibadoglu. I don't know if you're familiar with that case or not, but the United States doesn't stand by and let activists be imprisoned because of their speech, particularly with countries that we want to have a strategic relationship with, including a financial relationship with. We consider sanctions for those types of activities. Tell me how the administration is handling those types of activities within Azerbaijan and why the continuation of the waiver doesn't give the wrong signal in trying to resolve the conflict.
Thank you, Senator. President Biden and Secretary Blinken have made very clear that human rights and our values are at the center of our foreign policy. And we take every opportunity to drive that home with all of our partners, every country that we deal with, including with Azerbaijan. And as you rightly point out, we have an opportunity and an imperative to develop a strategic relationship with Armenia as well as Azerbaijan. In that context, when we look at requesting a waiver for 907, we want to make sure that we're doing two things. First of all, that none of the assistance that we provide could ever be used for offensive action against Armenia, and two, that it is in the U.S. national security interest to do that. In the past, when we have requested 907 waivers, we've used that assistance to help the Armenians beef up their border security, especially with Iran, and that has rendered concrete results in terms of stopping stopping narco trafficking, which is used to finance the IRGC. So there are real results from that. But we hear you on needing to be very serious and to be very thorough as we deliberate on whether or not to request a 907 waiver. We take that responsibility very seriously. I would note that the last 907 waiver expired in June. We have not submitted a new waiver request yet because we are reviewing the situation very carefully. I also want to assure you, Senator, that we look at the wide range of tools that are available to us to influence the behavior, to persuade others, along, and we will. We
just
won't rule anything out.
Let me just interrupt at that point because I have a limited amount of time. I hope you'll get back to me in regards to the specific case I mentioned.
Okay, I
Thank
sure
you.
will.
And let me just, if you read the language of the waiver, it's not the way Congress wrote it. I mean, I think you have to follow the waiver language, and it's not the use of the funds, it's the activities on the ground. So that to me is not carrying out the directive from Congress. And then lastly, let me just point this out. I've been in Congress, the House and the Senate for a long time, and this conflict predates my service in the House of Representatives, let alone the United States Senate. I serve on the Helsinki Commission, chaired it many years. I know the OSCE Minsk group. That group started in the 90s and has been declared dead by some, but certainly has not been effective in ending this. We know about the violations of the ceasefires over and over and over again. This conflict has gone on way too long. We saw that when we've had long-standing conflicts, U.S. leadership has been instrumental in ending those conflicts. We've seen that in our hemisphere. U.S. leadership is needed desperately to end this humanitarian crisis and give us a path towards a resolution of the conflict.
Senator, we agree with you fully. That's why we've got the special advisor, the senior advisor out in the region. We've been engaged for weeks, months, years. That's also why the Secretary of State has personally been engaged in these peace discussions, and will continue to do that.
Senator Murphy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for convening this hearing. Thank you for your testimony today. I mean, let me first just associate myself with the remarks of the chairman and Senator Cardin and others. This is obviously a crisis, one that requires active U.S. leadership. I understand the difficult question regarding the pressure points on Azerbaijan, but at this point, I think you have to put all possible tools on the table because gentle diplomacy does not seem to be working. I guess I want to ask you a question about the state of the Russia-Azerbaijan relationship, because we have been hard at work, along with our European colleagues, over the course of the last decade, trying to help Europe slowly wean itself off of dependence on Russian gas and oil. And part of that strategy has been to deliver more Azerbaijani gas and oil to Europe. We think that that's a more responsible choice. I think we now have to question whether or not that premise stands, and it is interesting that Russia is making these new overtures to Azerbaijan because it sees that their energy products are going to matter more to Europe, and to the extent that Russia and Azerbaijan can link up on national security policy, then the leverage that Russia is losing, it perhaps could gain back. And so what are the implications for the U.S. and for Europe as Azerbaijan and Russia draw closer? What's the nature of that relationship? And did we perhaps make the wrong bet by moving more Azerbaijani resources into Europe? Could we come back, and could Europe come back to ultimately regret that decision?
Thank you for that question. The relationship between Azerbaijan, Armenia, Georgia, everybody else in the region with Russia is dictated by geography and history. And it's not just the history of a few years in the Soviet years, it's generations and centuries here. We are working hard to rebalance that in our favor. What we also notice is that this agreement that Armenia and Azerbaijan reached in November of 2020, we're not a party to it. And that agreement calls for the Russians to provide peacekeepers to enforce the terms of that agreement. I think it's fair to say that the Russians haven't delivered. And that's part of the reason why you're seeing the Armenians beginning to question that relationship. On the broader issue of energy, that's an urgent need. All of the countries in Europe and around the world, I would say, have concluded that it is not a good idea to be sole source to Russia for their energy needs. We have had an effective period of work with the Azerbaijanis in helping them to double the amount of gas that they will be bringing to Europe by the year 2027, from about 10 to about 20 BCM. That southern gas corridor is extremely important for ensuring that there is energy diversity for Turkey, Greece, Bulgaria, potentially Albania, and definitely Italy, and possibly into the Western Balkans. So we cannot underestimate how important that is. There's also the oil pipeline that runs from Baku, Tbilisi to Ceyhan, and we need that to keep functioning. The main task here is to enable our friends, partners, allies to break free of the stranglehold that Russian energy has had on them over the last few generations.
Listen, right, but our alternative is turning from dependence on one dictatorship to a different dictatorship. And the question now becomes, are we funding Azerbaijan's efforts to impose a brutal blockade on the Armenian people? And so again, I think it underscores the importance of the ultimate goal, which is to